So I have an Anker F3800, and I've noticed that it appears to have a pretty high inverter self-discharge rate. So if nothing's running on it, it shows no output, but it also discharges itself pretty quickly. So what I'm looking to do is run it down to 0%, charge it with a kilowatt in series with the cord that charges it, see how many kilowatt hours it takes to charge, and then let it sit idle on for as many days as it needs to go back to zero. And in doing that, what I'll be able to do is determine the round trip charge efficiency of the 3800, and also hopefully determine the quiescent current, if you can call it that, of the inverter's idle state, because it appears to be something like 100 watts or 50 or 100 watts, because it's pretty high. I do hear the fans come on quite often from time to time. It's quiet right now, but even with no load, the fans come on when it's cool outside. It's 60 degrees Fahrenheit or so right now, and the inverter's reporting about 60, 62 Fahrenheit, which is fine. Cool, and under no situation would I expect it to need to turn the fans on at that idle state. So I'm going to run a test to see how it turns out. I do have one expansion battery on, and what I'll do is I'll charge it with the expansion battery on to 100%, and I'll just add up the base loads, or the nameplate battery capacities on the whole thing, and then count how much went into that for the double. But I will just discharge the 3800 itself, so I believe it's something like 3.8 kilowatt hours of battery per unit here, right? So the expansion battery is, I think, 3.8, and then the F3800 is also 3.8 with the inverter. So when I do the discharge test, it'll just be the base. So I'll get running. Anker F3800 test that I just ran a week or so ago to determine how many watts the base load of the inverter is. So what I did is I charged it to full and basically did a timed test with only the base battery, so 3.84 kilowatt hours worth of storage per the nameplate. I had an issue where the inverter kept turning off after 15 minutes or so with only the inverter turned on and nothing plugged into the output. So what I ended up doing is I plugged in a kilowatt meter and a laptop power supply plugged into absolutely nothing. And I made an estimate that that's about 3 watts. It doesn't even really read on a kilowatt meter, but it's a few watts, so it's worth noting, but it's almost negligible. So over time, I basically took a start time and date and did a empty calculation on that to let the math work out in sheets here, and just kind of did the calculation for time. It came up with a duration for the 3 different groups I did. Total minutes. I had to do some funny business because of the way hours and minutes convert to durations, but basically I was able to convert to decimal hours here, and based on that, it was a total amount of energy depleted from the battery pack itself. So if you look here, it's a percent depletion per hour, so how many percent SOC you lose per hour. And then if you calculate that, with this 3.84 here, you end up with watts per hour. So what I would actually do here is subtract about 3 off of this time. So about 66 watts continuous just to run the inverter with nothing plugged into it. So this is a 6,000 watt inverter, continuous, and it's not unusual to have a kind of a 1% loss on that inverter from just base idling, running the fans, running the inverter, running the switching electronics, but it is kind of high. Um, in less than around 2 days, little over 2 days, the entire battery pack can be dead with just the inverter turned on, and no solar going into it. So I think it could be better, but overall, it is nice that it's a 6,000 watt, 6 kilowatt inverter, and it has a nameplate capacity of 3.84 kilowatt hours with no expansion battery. I have one expansion battery, so that doubles that. Um, but if you think about it, you need to factor this in to your day-night operation if you're doing this to an off-grid cabin setup, and you need to make sure that the solar can overcome that 70 watts, 67 watts, 24 hours a day, right? So if you're getting 4.5 hours of sun or 5 hours of sun on average across the year in your panels, you need to make sure that you've got enough load to cover just the inverter's loss. So you need something around at least a kilowatt hour of panels, or I'm sorry, a kilowatt of panels just to make it work. So that's it, but kind of a quick little test.